All right. For those of you just joining us, my name is Andrew Dahlberg. I'm the president of Champion Briefs, and I'm acting as the host for you today. We're really excited to have provided all of the sessions throughout the day about coaching the different speech and debate events, about how you can improve communication tactics on your team, just general online tips and tricks. And now we're moving into our last session of the day, which is about tournament preparation, logistics, everything having to do with tournaments. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ben Gaddis, who's going to take over this session. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Andrew, for having me, and thank you all for coming. I've got a fairly boring PowerPoint for you all, but I think it'll kind of help us get the conversation going. So I wanted to talk about preparing for a tournament, and specifically tournament logistics. I think the biggest prep that you can do for a tournament is knowing that you are going to be successful and being able to get there, compete, and come back to your school. And so I wanted to present tournament logistics to and from and at home. And so I'll begin with talking about the questions that you need to be thinking of when you are going to schedule a tournament. I have some broken out after this, but you need to think about how many tournaments you're going to go into in a year, kind of what are your budget requirements or concerns. Can you travel 4 kids? Can you travel 30 kids? How many people are on your team? How many are going to want to go to a tournament? And more importantly, how the type of tournament will change what you do there and the type of preparation that you need to do for it. So the first big area that I want to go over is local versus travel. Now, these are 2 terms that I've come up with. I have basically defined local as anything that you can wake up in your own bed, rare for some speech coaches and debate coaches, drive to the tournament at a local high school. It's within a driving distance to get there safely, and then more importantly, get home at the end of a long day safely, versus a travel tournament. A travel tournament for me is anything that will require a hotel room. So these are the first 2 big questions you have to ask, because it separates not only the type of preparation you have to do, but also what you need to get from your team. So once I decide kind of my team size, my budget constraints, or things that I can use my budget for, I then look at mixing local versus travel. I largely believe that travel tournaments are really important to kind of give kids national exposure. I believe that it's public speaking and public debate, and so we should be doing it for the public. And I'm a former press secretary, so the public to me is actual people's in seats watching, experiencing things, and the variety of viewpoints and paradigms that you get from across the country. That said, you can't or will not want to travel your team all year round. You could spend every day, and I did this when I was coaching at the University of Texas, you can spend every weekend traveling, living out of a suitcase, going far, spending a whole weekend. That is the quickest way to get burnout. However, if you only go to locals over and over again, your kids aren't necessarily getting new ballot exposure, different paradigms, making them think and have to perform for a different public than before. Once I kind of think about those 2 things, I then put together a full tournament calendar, and I use a Google sheet that I'll probably show you all at the end, where I put in the tournament name, the tournament dates, where it's hosted, if it's online or in person. That's a brand new one for me in the last 2 years. And then I add, and I'll talk about this, I add any other information for students that might be important, such as deadlines to sign up, deadlines to drop, and then if there's any fees accrued. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Once I put together my tournament calendar, and I do it for the whole year, the nice thing, I always suggest doing a Google Sheets, because you can just copy that into the next year, change the dates at the top of the document and throughout. And then it makes your maybe budget process, if you have to submit for a budget every year for the next year, much easier to kind of give that idea. One suggestion that I have is I have a master tournament calendar that's like for me, and I can move it. And then I have one, I call it the live doc tournament calendar. I have one that's forward facing so that the parents, students, and admin can see. I'll get into that in a minute of why that's important. But like I said, I love Google Sheets. I love a column, something that just runs the dates very easily so I can get a whole picture. The next thing I do is I try to publish that as soon as possible. So if you can do a full year's calendar, even with guesstimates, we'll talk about drops and deadlines in a minute. If you can do a whole year's calendar and get that out soon, then you can do my next favorite part, interest surveys. So if you have a team that is capable of going to Harvard, for instance, Harvard is a 4 or 5, maybe 12-day tournament. I forget how long it really is. I just get through it as I get through it. And it will almost always be the most popular option at a lot of schools. A lot of kids will save up money all year to go to Harvard. And so getting that interest early on helps you make some decisions, which once again, the master calendar versus the live calendar will be affected. But I try to make an interest survey. I use Google Forms and I kind of copy all the events that I know we compete in or that are offered. And I put that out, if I can, around the same time as I put out the calendar. So this gives me an idea, kind of like a Facebook invite. Not everybody who says they're coming is going to attend, but you at least know how much to buy. A good tournament is like a party, and we're going to learn that in a minute. After I have my interest surveys in that, I then ensure that everybody knows where the deadlines and the drop fines are. So one big thing about tournaments, and I'll go in a little bit more in depth next with the tournament invite, but tournaments can be really affordable with prior planning. If you kind of are trying to piece together a tournament schedule as you're going, you're going to find very quickly that you've made quite a lot of expenditures. You're paying a lot of fines and you're paying fees that you didn't need to. And depending on your situation, even I would say the most wealthy of programs will probably still have a financial officer or accountant that will come for you for every penny spent. So note your deadlines and drop fines. And this is important to let kids know as well. So you want to know when you have to sign up for a tournament. Oftentimes, you really want to know the day that you can sign up, the very first day. Online tournaments, some are just letting everybody compete. Some are still keeping limits and caps. In-person tournaments will have caps. So you don't want to sign people up for a tournament on tabroom.com or Speechwire or send a fax and then find out that they're not going to be able to go, but you've already bought plane tickets. Also note the drop fines. Once again, the interest sheets will tell you who wants to go. I then do a sign up. And then even after the sign up, I let them know when they need to drop by so that we don't accrue a fine. My team, and this is part of preparation, we charge the student for drop fines the week of. So those can be anywhere from $25 to $100 to $200 as you get closer and closer. And so we let the students know where those drop fines are, and then we basically have them pay for that. More often than not, by just letting them know that there are drop fines and there are deadlines, the students get prepared and they know what's coming up. By having kind of those like absolutely strict lines, you find a lot more preparation and a lot more coaching as well. So the most important thing before we get into travel and other things is looking at the tournament invite. On tabroom.com, as you sign up for a tournament, almost always on the tab that says website, you will find the tournament invite. They can be in the email, various state organizations, the Texas Forensic Association, the Florida Forensic League. They all have year-round invites, but they will also specifically publish an invite. The invite is a secret contract. It's a contract that you were not aware that you were signing. It's very much a Supreme Court written posted law, if you will, of forensics, as in the invite going out is the rules of the tournament, and it's what you're agreeing to. And so you really need to read every invite. Every school that is hosting a tournament and every organization has their own rules. And I'm going to tell you about some important ones right now that I think are worthy of looking at. Slot fees and events. A tournament like Harvard is like $150 or $100 a slot. A local tournament might be $6 a slot. And by slot, we mean a PF team, an LDer, a individual entry. We refer to that as a slot. And then with those slot fees, we also want to look at the events. Some schools will say that a duo counts as two because there's two people and they're buying two trophies. So those fees will change. And so no tournament is going to be blanket $10 for everything anymore. It's really important that you see those slot fees and those events. The next, and I cannot stress how important these are, judge fees and burdens. For every 6 slots of an individual event, you'll need 1 judge. Policy is a judge per rounds, so you'll owe individual rounds. PF and LD largely is looking for 1 judge per every maybe 2 slots or 2 entries. That is referred to as your burden. If you do not provide those judges, you could pay a fee, you could be dropped. There's all sorts of fun punishments. And that is why I always critically say, if you're going to read one thing in the tournament invite, read up on judge fees and burdens. How many people do you owe? How many bodies are there? And specific to the bodies as well, entourage rules in debate. If you bring a bunch of parents that you don't train and they're just around, certain tournaments under entourage rules, because they're part of the entourage, will say, well, we want them to judge. And now that will come back on you. If they don't show up, they refuse to, that can be more fines and burdens. So that's why I like to call entourage rules and surprises its own thing. Tournament invites, as somebody who's hosted both like a collegiate national tournament, I mean, one of the major high school tournaments, and has been in tons of tab rooms. These fees and burdens and things are just to kind of make sure that the kids have the best experience. When judges don't show up, things like that, there are issues. However, when you're a director of forensics, when you're a coach and you're trying to figure out all of these things, you kind of want to make sure that everybody in your inner circle is ready and there, but also that you're not, once again, paying $200, $300 for judge fees. You can hire judges. If you think you're going to hire a judge, you need to put that information in early. Most tournaments stop hire requests. So a tournament will hire a judge for you. They'll stop the hire request 2 to 3 weeks out, almost a month out, because they're trying to get bodies in seats, paychecks ready for them. So if you don't get your hire request in and then you owe a judge and you don't provide it, that can be in the $500 to $700 range some weekends as well. Finally, look at your deadlines. When do you have to add judges by? When do you have to add students? Not every tournament is going to be super open to just adding judges as they go. I will tell you a secret. Most tournaments want judges, and so we'll just take them and not be there. But there have been tournaments where if you don't get your judges in by Tuesday, then we're going to just charge you for all the judge fees. And then they just go out and hire. Finally, drop fines. Note the drop fines, and then definitely look on the websites where you enter the students, or even just the materials, that the drop fines don't go up. So for instance, if you drop someone 2 weeks out, it's $15. If you drop them the week of, it's $25. If you drop them the morning of, it's $200. And so by knowing those little pieces, you can, once again, stop hemorrhaging money you don't need to, and then tournament logistics and that go much easier. So what I do for every tournament, and I think this is both my ADHD and just my like paperwork life. I love folders filled with information and things to glance through. I think it's another previous habit. I make a tournament sheet for every tournament. So this is kind of a document that says where, when, what events are offered, the drop dates, the fees and fines. This can be on an Excel sheet. It could be part of the calendar. I actually like to make physical documents and make a folder even for online or in-person tournaments. And I'll get to those pieces in a minute. But the tournament sheet is kind of the cover sheet for all things. This is also the best information that as you get closer to a tournament, you can remind kids what they need to do to get ready and how they can get ready. And more importantly, if they drop, what fines or fees there might be. So next, after you kind of do a tournament sheet, that's going to come back a few times. I like to do a body count. You've got to think about at least these 4 groups, and there's a 5th when travel's involved. How many students are you bringing? What judges will you need to bring? Will parents come along? And will you bring chaperones? So will you bring fellow coworkers? It's important when we're thinking about, especially travel tournaments, that you realize that judges, parents, and chaperones can be, all 3 can be one. They can be individual. You can have a parent judge. You can have a chaperone judge. I have some thoughts and ideas on this. I'll say, when you travel, things will always be stressful. Things can occur. A kid might need to go to the hospital. You may have issues that you need to deal with. You're in tab. You need to make sure that you have people you can trust. So you need people that are going to show up to judge their rounds. You're going to need to be able to have folks that know how to do check-ins, find the kids. I'm going to talk about insurance in a bit, like in a fun, quick way. I'm not going to actually talk about insurance. But you need to think about a lot of the factors that will affect there. So what I guess I'm trying to say is I always prefer to bring chaperones that maybe work for the school, are friends of mine that are bonded employees that can also judge. Parents can read a handbook or rules, and I'll get to that later. And their parents are some of the best jazz artists I've ever seen perform. They will play a variation on your rules left and right while still enforcing them and then complaining to bosses about them. Not an experience of mine, but I've seen that happen to so many people. So just, be careful who you bring along, because you want to be able to delegate until it becomes more work for yourself. And sometimes if you're not careful about that judge, parent, chaperone issue, and then specifically as well, counting student bodies, knowing how many people do you need to move 10 kids from one point to another, that's an important question. Never have too few sheepdogs. Finally, if you are traveling, always consider that transportation may include having to house someone. So if you take a coach bus, if you need somebody from the school, maybe a bonded employee under insurance, to drive something, you're going to have to put them up as well. But these are all kind of bodies and spheres that you are directly in charge of. The next 2 slides are for online tournaments. There's 2 ways to kind of do them. I am using a hybrid model still from last year. I have some students come on campus and some stay at home, and that's okay. I'm going to talk about the 2 differences though. My favorite way to compete, I think that you have to perform the way you practice and practice the way you perform, is to compete on campus in rooms. I find that my students do much better if I reserve them rooms. I have a very tiny campus. I have about 40 usable rooms at any given time. And I'm sharing that with the entire student body and faculty, especially on weekends. So I reserve rooms well in advance. I try to think about putting one student per room. COVID, sometimes I might need two per room if it's a PF team, for instance, or a duo. I generally do not with the speech, like with speech folks, if I can, I try to say, like, you're doing info in this room all day. That's just a COVID protocol of mine. If you want to flight your rooms to maximize, that's something you put in there. When you reserve rooms, look for plugs. This bit me hard last year when we started competing online more often. Make sure that where you're competing has plugs, that there's readily accessible internet. You do not want your students unplugging everything in a teacher's classroom for obvious reasons. Get to that in this next bullet point anyway. But make sure that there's readily accessible plugs. I had to buy some power strips so that my debaters especially could continue to compete, but we didn't have to unplug half the room. I do suggest that you test the Wi-Fi yourself in rooms. If you go to tabroom.com, I'm going to maybe show these things that people want to see in a second. You can check out an NSDA classroom at any time. You can check out how a Skype room works or a Zoom works. I generally like to just kind of keep a Zoom on, and I can just tell from years of using them if the Wi-Fi is good. Check if you have Ethernet connections where they might be, and if students can plug in, that's always the safest. My last thing is, much like if you're hosting a tournament, take photos at the beginning of a tournament of every room. This way you can continue to utilize rooms on your campus nearly every weekend if you're still in online tournaments, but also just a really good idea to basically make sure you have your very own CYA and you can make sure that you and your friends, i.e. faculty, are working out together. Off campus or home. So if my students want to compete from home, I set clear expectations and boundaries. I try to make sure that they know that they have to check in with me in the morning. So I generally do a team meeting. The people that are on campus meet with me in a classroom, while the people online have to join a Zoom where they see me. They know they have to be at that. That's how I know that they're awake. Again, you want to avoid drop fees or fines, and you want them to show up and have the best experience possible. I set a clear expectation and boundary that I want to see them. I also let them know that, they're competing. So they have to imagine as if they were competing on campus. So on campus, my students can't just drive off for lunch. That's just a specific rule of our campus. So I make sure that the kids at home do this. This also helps them just stay online, be able to be there and get there. As far as boundaries go too, I try to make sure, adapt to the students that you have, be very understanding. I'll just skip to the end of their external factors and factors within their home, but set clear boundaries. Please don't have your underwear all over the bed. Please don't have purses and bags and just junk everywhere. If they can do this, I think it both helps them competitively, but also it just doesn't allow strangers into their personal space. And it's kind of reminding them that they're inviting someone into their bedroom and that the boundary is for them. It's not for the other person. Next, I like to do Wi-Fi checks and coaching sessions. So if I have students that are going to compete from home, even if they're some of the math students that come to campus, I make sure that if they want to coach, that we coach in a similar format. So I like to have them coach with me on Zoom or Skype just to make sure that everything's working there. Again, you practice and you perform. I'm petting a good cat. This is an awkward thing. I'm sorry. That you practice and you perform the way that you were practicing. Most importantly, for off-campus or home, and this will be the same thing with Troom, you have to have quick contact capabilities. I know you had team communication earlier with Slack. If they didn't bring up, like, I really love having a Google Voice number so I can text or call the kids quickly, but not giving my phone, and try to get response. But make sure you have their phone number as well as parent phone numbers. More often than not, it's students just not showing up or they're still at lunch. But the worst thing is just trying to send an email from your office to someone at their home, and they're not answering it. All right, so the best part of speech for me is travel. I met some of my best friends in life and some of my best bosses in life just going to tournaments. So I will go very quickly through the important kind of logistical things. These are for tournaments where you will need to drive a distance, probably get a hotel or fly. So the first three things that you'll need are the trip sheet, tournament math, being prepared for what kind of math you're going to need to do. So how much is the tournament going to cost? Where is the tournament going to be? What kind of math problems will you have to solve? That's how I like to ask it. So when I'm done getting kind of the students and their interest, what numbers, as the students do sign up for a tournament, what numbers will be affected? So grab your variables, build your tournament map, then figure out your bodies. So for every student that signs up, how many judges will you need? How many of the judges can be parents or chaperones? What are your school's policies on chaperones? All right, very quick, boring thing. One of the best things you can do, regardless of where you are in your career, but if you are with a school, an institution, and you're going to travel, even if you're going to go locally, please do yourself the favor and learn about your school's insurance policies and what the bonding is. So for instance, when we travel, I kind of have a umbrella that all my students sit under. And so they're insured by the school and by the travel and this and that. And so part of that, though, means I can't just like let kids randomly leave the hotel at night. I wouldn't do that anyway, but insurance will tell you it's a double bad idea, because if they're not under your supervision, or depending on the rules of bonding, they are now a financial liability and you can be sued. We just live in a world where you should always be aware of lawsuits, private and public, but also it's just important to know insurance because it's going to affect the next item. Learn your insurance policy because it helps first with methods of transportation. You'll need to figure out how you're going to get there. You might want to get a school bus to go to a local. You may rent a van and drive kids if it's, within a few hours, especially if it's a travel. You may want a coach bus, or, there's air or train if you're retro. The methods of transportation do matter, and insurance will affect that as well. It might be really easy. I'll get into that under rentals in a minute, but you may want to rent a 15-passenger van. Your insurance policy may not let you. And if you drive one and you didn't know it, once again, it can cause issues. Recognizing the fees and fines that are going to be accrued. So airlines will charge a series of fines now. Well, they always have, but fees are specific. So baggage fees, there are now booking fees. There's a lot of fees and fines that are out there, and it's important to note those. And then this will come up again, but my favorite and most important questions to ask are cancellation and attrition rates. So when can I cancel? And if I cancel after a certain date, what do I still owe you financially? Going real quick through these so I can answer questions for y'all, but I've got tons of time. Rental vehicles. If you have a tournament that you can drive to, and that's a very good and cheap option, I almost always end up with rental vehicles. Just be aware right now that there is a shortage. And so that's going to cover my next 2 points. I would make my booking months out and also recognize that they're receiving months out bookings. It seems like there is a lack of vehicles and people are kind of in a panic. And so they're over renting vehicles and then releasing them. So do the same thing. That's why those interest sheets matter. The second you kind of know how many kids are going to each trip, I try to just make my bookings with Avis or wherever you have your benefits with, or your school requires, i.e. insurance, you use. I try to make those bookings right away as soon as I can, just to say, okay, well, I'll need at least 2 vans. If we drop down to 1, it's easier to get rid of a van than try to get one. Finally, and this has been true pre-pandemic and now, call early and often, even after securing reservations. Rental companies are infamous for kind of over-promising and not realizing that school groups will actually show up, and that we're different than kind of like corporate business groups that don't care. So make sure that they have a van. I like to just kind of call, or when I'm picking up a van, I'll check for my next trip while I'm there, just to say, oh, and you see that reservation still there too, right? Call early and often. Make sure that they have a vehicle there. It's been kind of a trend this year already that a lot of rental companies are just leaving people stranded until they can get a vehicle actually physically at the sites. Finally, know the gas policies. If you have to fill it up before returning it, or if you pay a fee and they just fill it up for you, specifically know the gas policies of the institution you work for. So you may think, oh, I'll just pay the extra $90 and not care, and I can just bring it right back. Your school may say, I'm not going to pay for that, and then make you do that. That is a pretty common practice now. If you want, if you have a larger team, Bus Life, once again, look at the costs and fines. Really try to get a fee sheet from them. In almost all cases of rentals and driving, I like to ask for fee sheets. I like to see, am I paying gas per mile? Am I paying just for the trip? Do I have an hourly rate for the driver? A lot of coach bus companies add these in. You can use a coach bus company 5 times, and then depending on how you book, they'll do another one. Also ask for seat counts if you can, and they have a website. I, every once in a while, like to go actually look at layouts. Sometimes 48 is really 38, 39. It's just, the seats are very small. You're really going to only get 1 or 2 kids on it. Double check that. Also, going back to the travel and the body count, company expectations of you are important. Know if they expect you to put up a driver, that's another hotel room. And drivers will not share a room. They have to have their own full room, full time. They also may require a period of, we're going to call it rest. There's a fancy term for it. It's all these things. You obviously want your bus driver to sleep. Some companies have kind of an expectation that once you arrive somewhere, you give the driver a full 12 hours. So like they'll sleep, they'll blah, blah, blah. But that means like you may be stranded somewhere for a little bit. Double check those expectations with coach buses. Airfare. And here's where like the money or freeness of this, but the money is in these next 2 slides, my friends. Here's where I'm going to help you out huge. Airfare. I'm going to remind you first, group rates are always negotiable. You're going to want to talk to a group agent, multiple group agents. They're going to tell you, like, Southwest does this to me all the time. They'll say, oh, well, the rate is locked for that day at 180. That's not true. They're always negotiable. They will not do that with group rates. It's really dumb business. They're just trying to scare you into it. You can do it. The earlier you book, the better. Airlines kind of like to know that they have full planes. It helps them better get an idea of their routes. When you are calling around, if you're going to do it yourself, to look for airfare, remember to ask for group agents. Group agents are specific. They handle group bookings. They are able to grab a lot more tickets. Sometimes if you're dealing with an individual agent, they may only let you buy 8 tickets at a time. And then you have to run the credit card 3 or 4 times. get a group agent. They'll be specific. They're able to grab a lot more seats, and there's that. I'll put my email up at the end. Here's my secret to airfare and hotels. I use bookers, and I use free bookers. And you might need to tell your school about these, because some will say, well, you have to go through this, you have to go through our travel agent or this or that. I use a group called Fly My Group. I tell them how many people are going, the kind of windows of when I want to be there, when I need to be there, when I want to leave, when I need to leave. And then they do all the work for me, and that's for free. I don't pay them to do that. They receive commission through the airlines. And so they actually get some pretty great rates as well, because airlines are trying to give them these big groups, and they'll kind of break these up. So I'll give you my contact at Fly My Group, because she knows speech and debate very well. She's an alum. And I let her do all the work for me. And as long as I pay American Airlines through check, it costs me and my school nothing, and I'm getting huge rates below. Also, the money you save is also worth the money in just your sheer time and physical exhaustion that you get back by letting someone else do that work for you. Next, hotels. I want to tell you that group rates are always negotiable. They'll tell you, well, we're a boutique hotel and we are locked at $198 a night. That's not true. All group rates are negotiable. Here, you're going to want to try to find a group agent, somebody who can get you a room block. Sometimes it's conference services, and you may want to just call conference services. This is if you have, obviously, more than 3 or 4 rooms, but honestly, at 4 or 5 rooms, I would start talking to group agents, because that's pretty much a block, and you can start to get discounts. Note the rate for the room. Sometimes hotels like to have sneaky weekend rates. So you're locking in on a Friday night rate, but then they charge $20 or $30 extra on a Saturday, Sunday, Marriott's. Join the Bond Boy Club, get those points, and then also lock rates in a singular way. Next, fees. Hotels are adding so many fees nowadays. So when you're negotiating with a hotel, they're going to tell you it's $118 a night, maybe. Ask them what other fees. Once again, ask for a fee sheet. You want to know everything. If a kid coughs and looks directly at a water bottle, are you going to be charged $20 for it? And then finally, fines. So anything that you do, a lot of hotels will create kind of surprise fines for. So if you want to move rooms, or you're like, I need all of my students on one room, one floor, they may fine you for that. So look that up. And finally, the most important word in hotel negotiations is attrition. That is basically how many. So if I get 20 rooms on a group rate, but I maybe need to drop some, there's been some emergencies or whatever. At what rate, where is my rate locked in? And what can I cancel without having to pay for? Or essentially, if I'm dropping 2 or 3 rooms, am I still paying for them for the next 3 nights? Even though you're going to book them with somebody else. So on that. I use a group here I didn't put on the slide called Travel Advocates. They're actually all speech alums that I competed with in college. And they do an amazing job. They are free $99 to me as well. Absolutely not a dollar spent. I tell them where I'm going, how many students are going. They are former speech folks, so they know that if they need to do 2-to-beds, or this year with COVID, they've been helping me negotiate our COVID policies when we travel. I have them handle all of that for me, give me great rates, and then I get Bonvoy points for Marriott for it, or I get Wyndham points, or when I was in college, I used them for La Quintas, and I can still, to this day, stay at any La Quinta for free, which is a joy. So have them book for you. Once again, I will say that term logistics is really all about delegating until it becomes more work for yourself. So the final thing that I do that kind of helps students get together is I put all of these things together. I have the costs set as soon as I can. And then I like to put together a tournament packet or a travel sheet. And so I'll show you that real fast. So we went to UT Austin recently. And so I made them a packet, and I've done this since college for my students. So this is what a travel packet looks like. I'll warn you up front. It will change most likely if you do a local, but this is where I take my trip sheet and I just add more and more information as we get closer, but I release a final thing. And this is kind of one way to get students around at tournaments, make your life so much easier, and fix things. So fun little cover. These are QR codes that I just drop in. So this takes them to my group me. We went to UT Austin, so here's a map. Gonna skip over the QR, that's my phone number. Here's what a trip sheet ends up looking like when I hand them to a kid. So it'll start differently. It generally will start with the dates, and then as I get the tournament schedule, I fill in the rest. And doing this, as you kind of see, I then have miscellaneous info, how to contact me, the airlines we're taking, what hotel we're staying at, the weather, items to bring, travel rolls. So the first thing they get about 2 or 3 weeks out from me, especially when the airline's booked, is a sheet that is just this and this. And then as we get closer, I put together a rooming list, going fast, you don't see names. I put in a map, my COVID policies. I can tell I used to work for a state's attorney. Tournament information, the schedules. And so I hand them this. And once I hand them that, I tell them that if they ask me a question from the packet, they owe me a quarter. They read the packet. And we get going on our tournament. Long story short here, there's a thing I heard when I was a child in Scouts, that the lack of prior preparation leads to pitiful, poor performance. And I think having as many pieces together for tournament logistics at the beginning of the year, and how to get ready for them and prepare, is the first key. Then I kind of work backward from that. So by having a travel calendar, having those interest sheets out, I have an idea of who needs to be ready and when. And the big thing, as you can kind of see through that, is just organizing and putting together your schedules and your tournaments, and having everything ready logistically makes the rest of the things easier. Because then coaching hours are actually about coaching and enjoying the kids and getting to work with them, getting to them inspired, trying to push them through that block, not letting them quit something, as I saw someone talk earlier. You have more time to focus on those things when everything kind of is put together and prepared. My biggest thing is live and die by the deadlines and the drop lines. By setting deadlines that kids can drop by, you begin to automatically see preparation occur. I do not let students go to tournaments that I or a member of the coaching staff have not seen them do their event or seen a practice or that. This helps me better defend them if they get in trouble in a round, and most importantly, helps keep me safe when it comes to all of the other things that you can run into as a coach. But I generally have them coach, see somebody before that deadline and that drop line. And you'll actually find that once they really kind of see that there's deadlines and drop lines, they will begin to really get prepared, really get working for coaching, and trying not to show up unprepared. And a lot of that is by having, if you can get like plain information in their hands with that trip sheet, the sooner that trip sheet looks like deliciously glorious for them, the more real it feels. So I try to have everything done as soon as I can to just kind of get those things ready. So I want to answer questions for the 5 people. 4.
Hey folks, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or you can drop a question into the chat. We'll leave it open for another couple of minutes to see if anyone has a question for Benjamin before we're done. So feel free to drop your questions.
All right. Yes, I'll answer any questions though in the field of speech and debate now too, I guess. Charles.
I have a question. I hung out here because this is an area of debate that I have no idea about, as I'm still a college student. But I was wondering, do you seriously find that prices for flights are the best far out? Or I know that you have, people do this for you, but my rule of thumb is usually looking to like 6 weeks ahead of my travel time. I guess this is just like a general travel question, but what are your insights?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So that now this is where I'll say so I have some information from when I used to work in politics and public affairs. And so 6 weeks out, even 3 weeks, when you're traveling a small, one person, 3 people, absolutely makes sense. And honestly, I do the hopper game. I learned a lot from schedulers in the candidates in that's office of these things. And that was one big thing when they had to travel full groups over 8 or 9 people, they began calling way in advance to try to grab on seats. Airlines, the reason I like to do that, Charles, ultimately is you really do kind of get what is the base rate. It may drop if airlines want to fill the seats. But as we know, as airlines fill up or that, it's about the negotiation game. Where I'd basically say is it's a lot easier if you have a group over 8 or 9 people, it's easier to negotiate with an airline that wants a seat back from you. Because the biggest thing is if someone doesn't show up or, you're trying to add on anything like that, you kind of have to have, it's just negotiation 101. You have to have something yourself. And so by booking groups way in advance, and I'm going to be honest, I do about a month to 6 weeks out myself anyway with groups. So as far as the advanced things go, you don't need to book your airfare for Harvard in August. That's probably not a good idea. But I try to use
that makes sense.
I try to use that. But when I'm at when I have enough interest, that's the day I start playing with the airline because it's easier to kind of lock in a rate than have to deal with group rates when they want 300 round trip or so.
Thank you for the insight.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anything in the chat. All right, Ben, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm sure it's super helpful for all the coaches out there who watched with us and will be watching online later. So thank you so much for all that insight. I'm going to see if I can use some of these airline negotiation tactics just in my everyday life because I think that's useful. So thanks. So with that, that's the conclusion of our coaching clinic day. Again, these videos will be posted online later. So if you want to go back and rewatch anything or catch up on a session that you weren't able to see, feel free to stop by our website later. And Arthur, you can follow up with our team anytime we're able to answer any questions later on for you. And that goes for everyone that's watching with us today. Thank you all so much for joining, and we will see you again sometime soon. Goodbye, everyone.